Okay guys, so let us actually start modeling. What I'll do first is to add in a cylinder because we're going to start by modeling the wooden part as well as all the cylindrical parts on the hammer. So what you will do is to add in an object by hitting Shift A to add an object, or you can always go to this menu. So Shift A, go to Mesh and add in a cylinder. So a pop-up box will appear on the bottom left and you can change how many vertices you want. Usually for low poly game objects, maybe around 16 or something would be good enough. But because I'm also keeping in mind that this could be a portfolio render, I'm trying to keep it at around 32. So now I'll press numpad 1 to go to the front view, and I'm going to go into wireframe by pressing Z and wireframe. Now just make sure that whenever you're modeling with our reference, you're pressing Z and going to wireframe so that you can see it in the back. And whenever you need to go back into solid view, you can press Z and solid to go back into the solid view. You can also change it over here, but I just prefer to use the shortcuts. So while I have this selected, I'm going to go to front view, wireframe, and I'm going to hit S to scale it downwards. And I'm going to just try to get the overall scale of this. So press S to scale it, maybe till around here. So now, I guess I can already go to edit mode just to match the reference. So while you have this object selected, make sure it's highlighted in yellow. Go over here and switch into edit mode because there's only so much we can do when we're in object mode to maybe scale it. You can definitely do it in object mode, but later on we will definitely need to go into edit mode. So I just want to try to get used to it first. So go into edit mode by switching this to edit mode, or you can also use the tab key to switch it while you have this selected. And now I'm going to do a box select. Now make sure that you are on vertex select, which is this dot. You can try many different selects by toggling between 1, 2, and 3. You can select the points, which are the vertices. If I press the number 2, you can select edges. Number 3 will let you select faces. Now, there are so many different ways to select things, and usually I would just try to use the best way. So for now, I think we need to select the ones on the top so that we can move it upwards. So I'm just pressing B to box select and drag it so that all these are highlighted, and I'll press G and Z to move it on a Z axis. I'm going to move it till it's around here. If you hold shift, you can move it a lot slower, so it's a lot more precise. And now we already have it over here. I'm going to do the same thing where I select these vertices by pressing B to box select, pressing G and Z to move this downwards. I'm going to hold shift till I have it somewhere around here. Now also make sure to apply your scale because it'll mess up your modifiers later if you don't. So just tab back into object mode, select it, press Ctrl A and apply your scale. Now I'll just show you a quick example of why you have to apply them. So for now, I'll just have 2 different cubes and I'll scale these both on the Z like so. And I haven't applied my scale on both of them, but first I want to add in my modifiers. So I'll add in this bevel, set it to 4, and maybe this one. I'll also just add in a bevel as well. So for the one on the right, I'm going to try to apply my scale by hitting Control A and apply scale. And you'll see that the bevel is a lot more even. I definitely need to turn it a lot lower. And you'll see that our bevel is a lot better. So yeah, just make sure that you always apply your scale. So again, just select your object, hit Control A and apply your scale. And if you need to, just turn the bevel segments a lot lower. So I'm just going to delete these and do the same for this, where I'm going to add a modifier while I'm in object mode. Add modifier, bevel, and make sure to turn your segments to 4. Make sure to apply your scale and set them out to something a bit lower, maybe to somewhere around here. So now we have this. I'm also going to right click and shade smooth so that we have better shading. And I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into the front view. Now that we're done with this wooden part, you'll see that there's a lot more details in the model. For example, these little crevices. But that's something that we'll be doing in our sculpting part. And a lot of the model is actually going to be super simple, and we're just going to put all the details into the sculpting part. So yeah, what I'll do is to just work on the bottom part first. So instead of adding in a new cylinder, I'm going to copy a face of this one. And the reason is because whenever you copy from an old object, you can actually keep the modifiers you've had before. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just make sure I'm in vertex select with the number 1. Press B and box select so that I'm selecting all of these on the bottom. And I'm going to just press Shift D to duplicate it, right click so that it stays in place. And now we actually have another face there. And if I were to hit S to scale it up, you'll see that we have another face that's scaled up. And while it is still selected, just make sure to press P and separate by selection. So now if I were to go back into object mode, you'll see that this is now a different object. And I guess to keep things easier, I will also go over here and switch my matcap to just the normal matcap and also set it to random so that for every different object, you would have a different color just to make sure things are working well. So now I'm going to go to edit mode, select all of these vertices, and I'm going to press E to extrude it down, like so. And I'm going to just press E to extrude it down again, and press S to scale it up. Press E to extrude it down, and E to extrude it down, and press S to scale it down. So now we have all these parts. So the E tool is the extrusion, and what it does is that it just creates more faces based on the angle of our normal. For example, if this is facing that direction, if you press E to extrude, it'll just go out in that direction. That's something that I use quite often, and you'll see that there are many different other tools that we will definitely use, but for now, I'll just try to keep it as less as possible. So now we have modeled this part, and what I want to do as well is to just make sure that I have my scale set to real world proportions, because for example, if I were to add in a cube right now, you'll see that the size is actually 2 meters. So what's happening is that this hammer is actually 2 meters, more than 2 meters tall. So we just need to make sure that it's a correct dimension so that in game engines, it'll actually be a correct size. So I'll press the N key to open the side panel, and also just make sure to stay in object mode and press S to scale it down. I'm going to scale it down till maybe it's around 60 centimeters, or maybe around 70 centimeters is good enough. So somewhere around here. And I'm going to just make sure to just select all of these. So I'm just shift selecting all of these. And I'm going to scale it down by the center of the world. So just make sure that you set your bounding box to 3D cursor so that it'll just scale based on this red dot over here. Let me just go into the front view with numpad 1, and I'll press S to scale it down. I'll go into wireframe by pressing Z and wireframe. I'm going to just scale it down till somewhere around here so that it's actually fitting inside the cube. So again, just delete this cube, and we also need to make sure to apply our scale. So again, just make sure to select these two mesh objects, just shift select both of these, press Ctrl A and apply scale, and you'll see that our bevels have become bigger. So I think for the amount, we're going to set it to 0.001 meters, and it should be super sharp like this. Like so. And it should work pretty well now. Now, the reason why I added bevels is because in real life, things aren't really infinitely sharp. They always have a little rounded edge. For example, if you were to look at your table, it definitely is like a tiny bit rounded. And I guess we can work on this part for now. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing tab, go into wireframe by pressing Z, and I'm going to just box select these ones. And same thing as before, we're going to press Shift D to duplicate it, right click so that it stays in place, and press S to scale it up. And also just make sure to switch it back to the bounding box center so that it'll just scale it based on the center of this. So I'll press S to scale it up. And while it is still selected, make sure to separate it into a different object. So now we have it. And what I'll do is to go into edit mode on this object this time. And while everything's selected with a shortcut A, press E to extrude it up. Like so. And same thing for this, we're going to just press Shift T to duplicate it, right click to stay in place, press S to scale it up, and while it's still selected, press P and separate by selection. And now we have this object as well. And I'm going to go into edit mode, press E to extrude it up. And we're going to do the same thing for this part. Now the rest of these parts aren't really cylindrical, they're more blocky, so we will have to use a different primitive. But while I have this top part still selected, just make sure you're box selecting them. And also make sure whenever you're box selecting, you do it in wireframe, because if you don't, then like it won't select through the mesh. It'll just select only the vertices that are facing us. So just make sure that you're selecting while you're in wireframe. Press Shift D to duplicate, right click so that it stays in place, press P and separate by selection. And now I'll just go into object mode, select this one, press G and Z to move it up, and go into edit mode, and I'll press E to extrude it up like so. I'll press Shift B, well, Control B to do a bevel operation. And what it does is that at first it can do a chamfer, but actually, while you have these selected, if you were to hit Control B and scroll the mouse wheel up, you can actually do a regular bevel, which is similar to the bevel modifier that we had. But in this case, we actually are going to just use a regular chamfer and use the modifier itself to make these bevels. So because we have copied our objects before, we have kept our bevel modifier, and it is still adding bevels to these ones as well. And that's the power of modifiers. So now we're done with all the cylindrical parts. I'll leave this video for now because in the next one, we're going to work on all these blocky ones. So see you in the next one. Goodbye.